Hello? My name's Ripley. Amanda Ripley. I need your help.
Please take a seat. Someone will be with you shortly.
I reviewed Alien Isolation over 10 years ago, back during the peak of my Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto 5 content. I know, I've been doing this for way too long. It was one of the first reviews I did, and although a lot has changed since then, my love for this game hasn't. I've revisited it many times over the years, but somehow I'd only ever played through it once back on the PS4. So for this review, along with deep diving its post-launch updates, the various ports of it, oh yeah, you better believe we're going to be checking out the amazing 360 version, I decided to do a full replay. I also chose to play through it on the Xbox Series X because, as I discovered, this version has a higher frame rate and HDR. I'll discuss the expansions too, without spoilers of course, and speaking of which, I've kept the entire video spoiler free. I know it's been out for over a decade, but the thought of spoiling it for someone makes me feel sad. Alright, let's get into it. Alien Isolation is a first-person survival horror game set in the same universe as the 1979 Alien film. It technically acts as a sequel, being set in between the events of Alien and Aliens. It picks up 15 years after the events of the first film and follows the story of Amanda Ripley, daughter of Ellen Ripley. She's searching for answers to her mother's mysterious disappearance and joins a mission to a decommissioned space station called the Sevastopol that promises to provide just that. If you've seen the director's cut of the second film, you'll know that Amanda's character is an incredibly interesting subplot that's begging to be explored, to the point where it makes you wonder why it's never been tackled in any of the subsequent films. Aesthetically, the game is in line with the first film, deliberately choosing a grimy analog future rather than some clean modern utopia. Although the resolution is capped at 1080p, on last gen at least, this suits the lo-fi look and feel and has prevented the visuals from becoming dated. Gameplay adheres to the film as well, being slow and methodical, rather than the action-centric sequel. And maybe this partially explains why the reaction from critics wasn't overly positive. Most agreed that the atmosphere and faithfulness to the source material is flawless. Some outlets praised it for its tense gameplay and for the aliens' AI, but plenty of others took issue with the pacing, the difficulty, and the overall length. Over the years though, it's gained a following, and a couple of fans in high places, and it seems like the sentiment is more positive than it was back in 2014. Although its original launch was relatively smooth by today's standards, it received a number of updates, including some DLC. It's also been ported to a couple of other platforms in recent years, with some interesting results. Isolation, in comparison to loads of other games these days, was pretty light on updates. So, well done Creative Assembly for not releasing a buggy mess that was missing features. While there were a few problems at launch, there's nothing here that stands out as egregious. Initially, there were some lip-syncing issues in the cutscenes across all platforms, and there were a couple of updates that addressed performance and crashes. I think the most intriguing additions in the updates were the two new difficulty modes: Novice, which was probably a reaction to the critics' "it's too hard" comments, and Nightmare mode. If you've played through on hard, you'll know how intense the regular experience is, but Nightmare dials this up even further. Resources are extremely hard to come by, the motion tracker is way less useful, and the AI becomes an absolute menace. The alien can hear a sparrow fart from a mile out, and comes running to deliver death for even the tiniest of mistakes. I wanted to play through on Nightmare for this video, but it was clear after a couple of hours that my heart was not up to the task. I wouldn't recommend this mode unless you've played through the game recently, because it essentially requires you to have memorized where the objectives are and to know how to move around without being heard.
If anyone can hear this, we need help. Repeat, we need help urgently. Please respond.
Attention. Please remain calm and proceed to the nearest exit.
"10 years on, Alien Isolation remains beautiful and atmospheric in a way that few games have equaled. I am extremely biased, of course. Alien is one of my favourite films, and I've lost count of how many times I've seen it. I think it holds up extremely well, and Isolation captures the feeling of being in that cold, dark universe better than any other movie-tying game has managed. The gameplay has largely stood the test of time as well. Yeah, things like the crafting would probably have been better if they were diegetic, but the rest of the puzzles and UI interactions remain embedded in the world. I made a video a few years back gushing about the UI if you want to hear me talk about it at length. There's a perfect balance of stealthing, crafting, puzzles, and strategy. I love that combat, while possible, is rarely the best choice, especially on the harder settings. If you play on hard, you can't even rely on the same strategy for too long because the alien will adapt. This remains the most stressful thing I've played to date, more stressful than the original Dead Space and even more stressful than Mr. X from the RE2 remake. At least he can't run. If it's not the alien overstaying its welcome, it's other humans shooting at you or the goddamn androids. You're expected to take a lot of risks and you'll die many times attempting to figure it out. It's less about testing your fine motor skills and more about testing your problem-solving abilities and your nerves, typically at the same time. It doesn't rely on fancy movement mechanics, haptics, or online servers, and I think that's why playing it today feels as fresh as it did in 2014. This isn't a fast-paced game, although I think playing it at 60 frames per second feels a hell of a lot better than 30, because it feels more immersive. You wouldn't think it would make a huge difference, but in retrospect, the original console releases are kind of sluggish and unresponsive. It makes me feel sorry for anyone who had to endure the 7th gen ports. And yes, I know that 60 frames per second and higher has always been possible on PC, but as a die-hard console player, having this as an option now is amazing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll talk about the new ways to play it later in the video. On playing it through again, I agree that the pacing is a bit uneven, especially towards the end. Yeah, goddamn, this game has more endings than Return of the King. It's extremely challenging on hard too, which is the recommended setting. In some situations, it feels like luck of the draw whether or not the alien will drop down on top of you, and I completely understand why some critics became frustrated. You can't just make a beeline for the objective. It demands patience and time, neither of which are in a large supply when you have an embargo deadline rapidly approaching. Although the presentation is still incredible, there are a handful of things that don't look great, especially by today's standards. NPCs, which never looked cutting edge, look downright offensive compared to their modern contemporaries. The character models and animations are mostly okay, but some of the tweening can be pretty rough. The wax faces are easily the biggest problem, and the lip syncing is on the border of so bad it's good.
I believe your contact is Marshal Waits, is that right? I'll hail Sevastopol and arrange boarding with him.
I'm guessing only the cutscenes were patched. There's not a ton of human NPC interaction though, and the dark lighting does make it easy to ignore, so it's not the end of the world. The working Joes on the other hand fare much better. Their faces don't animate at all, and their primitive appearance is contextually perfect. They kinda look like a bald Michael Myers, and I reckon they're the scariest thing in the game by far, and I love how passive-aggressive they are. There are some visual issues too. I noticed a fair bit of obvious LOD at close distances on the Xbox One version, which is apparently a problem with all the console versions. It can definitely be distracting, and along with the shimmering edges is a reminder that this is over 10 years old. Additionally, I came across a few graphical glitches on Series X. This might be a result of running the game with FPS boost, because I can't say I've seen these problems in other versions of the game. The audio design thankfully remains stellar and does a lot of the heavy lifting when talking about atmosphere. Sometimes it gets a bit carried away and drops an out-of-sync stinger, causing you to shit your pants for no reason. Otherwise, it's hard to find issues with it. Everything feels authentic, from the sounds of the station with its various doors, lights, alarms, computers and emergency systems, to the way it reuses and remixes the original theatrical score. It's pretty clever too. It repurposes certain cues just to fuck with you. For example, pulling out the motion tracker makes a similar noise to the alien dropping down from a vent, making you second guess if it's safe or not. Issues aside, this is still a great adventure overall. The immersion and faithfulness to the source material are second to none. The story isn't flawless, but I think fans of the films will enjoy how it links into the universe, and although some parts of it can drag on, it manages to save some nice surprises towards the end that make seeing it through worthwhile.
My Lucky. Lucky.
Now activated. The ship
You.
will detonate in T-minus
My Lucky Star.
minutes.
Lucky.
Isolation has quite a lot of DLC. Most of it comes in the form of new survivor challenges. These let you play as different characters that are mostly from the campaign. Each has their own unique loadout, which lets you tackle the challenges in different ways. I wouldn't consider any of these spoiler for the main campaign because they're very light on narrative. They primarily offer up new gameplay experiences with a much faster pace than the base game. They don't introduce any new gameplay mechanics, but they do include some new locations and feel quite different to play. You get a choice of objectives to complete that have unique rewards, like weapons and blueprints, many of which benefit you in later objectives. The idea is to complete them as quickly as you can to maximise your score. To do this, you'll need to play through each objective a few times to figure out how to complete them efficiently. Playing through them will also help you figure out what order to tackle them in, so that you can earn the best rewards to help you in the later objectives. This is a semi-permadeath mode, although you can sacrifice some of your score to temporarily save your progress. These challenges include leaderboards for the fastest times too, although good luck touching the top 10. If you want a bit more lore and some interesting new challenges that have a different spin on the gameplay, this is a good way to get that. There are 5 of these in total, which cost between $10 and $12 Australian each, depending on the platform, or they can be purchased as a season pass between $30 and $40 Australian. This occasionally goes on sale too, so it might be worth wishlisting if you want to grab them all. The base game does come with a handful of survivor maps, so I'd recommend giving them a go first to see if you want more. It got 2 expansion type things as well. They're 100% fan service and don't actually expand on the campaign, but they are quite good. Both of them take place on the Nostromo and have you taking the role of one of the original crew members, reenacting scenes from the film. And yes, the original voice actors all came back to reprise their roles. Actually, just as a side note, Waits from the main campaign is played by William Hope. You know, Mr. 38 Simulated Drops, which I somehow totally missed until now. The standout for me is Last Survivor, where you play as Ripley in the final moments aboard the Nostromo. As a huge fan of the film, getting a chance to explore the spaces from the film and getting a sense of how they're all connected is a nerd fantasy come true. It's incredibly tense as well, with the alien constantly bearing down on you, trying to prevent your escape. If you only get one piece of DLC, this is it, hands down. Oh, and one last thing, just be aware that Last Survivor and Crew Expendable are not included in the Season Pass. They're not expensive, but they are quite short. I think the most interesting update to the game over the past 10 years are the new ports of it. This was originally a cross-gen title launching on the Xbox One, PS4, PC, as well as the Xbox 360 and PS3 in 2014. The definitive way to play it is and has always been on PC. High frame rates and resolutions, better textures, ultra-wide support, mods, a free lap dance on install, all make this the best looking and performing version by miles. The original console ports offered 2 very different experiences. The 7th gen versions, if you haven't already guessed, look and run like arse. I get why publishers poop out these cross-gen ports, there's a big install base to milk, but the results here are just awful. I don't actually think these side-by-sides do a great job of showcasing just how terrible these versions look and feel to play. They have sub 720p resolutions, a 30 FPS cap which both the PS3 and 360 struggle to reach, as well as lower texture quality, screen tearing, less visual effects, and somehow even worse anti-aliasing. Everything looks blurry and rough, and I think a lot of the atmosphere is lost. Look, I'm not saying they're unplayable, they're just the ugliest and clunkiest versions by quite a large margin. The 360 port isn't even backwards compatible on the Series X, which makes sense I guess considering the Xbox One version is. So unless there's no other options available to you, it's probably best to steer clear of them. The Xbox One and PS4 versions fare much better, and both have advantages when playing on current hardware. The PS4 version never got a PS4 Pro or PS5 update, but the additional horsepower does at least guarantee solid performance, whereas occasional dips is something you'll have to live with on the base PS4. Xbox users get a much better deal, with the game being able to take advantage of FPS boost for a solid 60 frames per second. It also gets access to Auto HDR. While nowhere near as impressive as natively implemented HDR, the additional contrast and depth is a perfect fit for the game's art direction. I was constantly blown away with how good Isolation still looks, and this was helped in no small part to the benefit of HDR. It's a superb looking game. It would have been nice to see something done about the base resolution. Some other backwards compatible games on the Xbox Series machines, even 360 games, have 4K resolutions, whereas here it's still 1080p. Isolation has always had a pretty clean aesthetic though, and on a positive note it upscales nicely on high-res displays. Another positive is that load times are significantly reduced. The time it takes from death screen to loading your last save is almost instant, and loading in a new area on average is either halved or less. When looking at some of the more recent ports, things are in a pretty interesting place right now. The Switch got a port in 2019, which includes all of the previously released DLC. This is one of the cheaper options too, so if you want to grab all the DLC, then this ain't a bad way to do it. That's not the only good thing about it though. It uses a different type of anti-aliasing and has basically no shimmering at all. It's still locked to 30 frames per second and has a display resolution that maxes out at 1080p in docked mode and 720p in handheld. When compared to the original console release, despite not maintaining a solid 1080p like on Xbox One or PS4, it's actually a cleaner looking version. The performance is very solid too, to the point where you could make a good argument for it being superior to the Xbox One version and maybe even the PS4. It's widely considered to be one of the best ports of any game on the Switch, and it's kind of wild that the Switch is able to deliver a version that's visually cleaner than the PS4 and Xbox One versions. Android and iOS got ports in 2021. I'm not sure who'd want to play this on a tiny screen with touch controls, although to be fair there's probably a large audience without PCs or consoles, and it actually looks pretty incredible considering what it's running on. Some features appear to be missing, and the lip syncing is still horrendous, although it's a pretty close analogue to the original console release. It uses a different anti-aliasing, and again is more or less jaggy free. It even has a couple of graphics settings that let you choose quality over performance. Graphics mode targets 30 frames per second, and has a native resolution of 2532 by 1170. Performance mode aims for up to 60 frames per second and a 900p resolution. In testing on an older iPhone 11, I did notice some occasional dips, so it stands to reason that on newer, more powerful phones, it's likely to be more stable. From a visual point of view, it was pretty hard to see much of a difference between the two modes on such a small screen, so I reckon performance is the way to go. There's also a battery saving mode, which does have a noticeable impact on fidelity, although the frame rate seems largely intact. While I think some of the atmosphere and magic is lost playing on a screen this size, this is a surprisingly good port of the game, which is something I didn't anticipate.
How can I help you?
I need a compression cylinder.
Components warehouse. Row 1, stack B. Follow me.
In conclusion, do I recommend Alien Isolation? I think it's pretty obvious what I'm going to say, but damn straight I do. If you somehow passed on the opportunity to play it, or it's been sitting in your pile of shame, you know who you are, then bust it out and fire it up. With the sequel confirmed, now is the perfect time to play it for yourself and see why it's beloved by so many. It holds up extremely well, and with so many ways to enjoy it, many of which tidy up its performance and visuals, it continues to be an incredible experience that perfectly captures the essence of the film. Even if you've played through it before, I guarantee a second run won't be exactly the same as your first, and if you're willing to go off the beaten track, the Sevastopol has many nooks and crannies with things to discover. I can't wait to see how Creative Assembly builds on what is already an incredible experience. If you're a fan of the franchise, especially the first film, fucking play it.